A couple observations. First, I'd like to echo some of the previous speakers' observations around sense of urgency. If there's one message I'd like to convey today is time is our enemy here. So a sense of urgency around how we move forward with our protection mechanisms and strategies as it relates to the power grid is of national concern going forward. So I thought I would share from an industry perspective a few observations with respect to the threatscape and what we're really dealing with. So I'm going to share a few statistical elements here as I go through the presentation today. But first, a few observations. The statistics demonstrate very clearly that there is a clear and present danger. I believe the general made that observation as well. You will see that as I go through some of the numbers, that it is growing exponentially, the threats year over year in this particular category related to the cyber grid and critical infrastructure overall. Another observation, our adversaries actually start with defining success up front. Something we don't do well overall as an industry and in our public-private partnerships. We spend a lot of time on how we will organize to defend. I don't personally believe that we spend enough time thinking about what success looks like up front. The adversaries actually start there. They also clearly already know how to defeat our defense systems because we publicly advertise how we go through and do cyber exercises, etc. So the advantage of time and how we actually go about protecting the infrastructure is actually on the adversarial's benefit at this point in time. The other observation I have is the adversaries, not only do they have the advantage of time, but they're not restricted by who's responsible for defending or protecting the infrastructure, right? When they design a campaign, it is a targeted attack to achieve a very specific mission within a certain time frame. And most of the attacks that happen in this particular area, and I'll go through as I go through the presentation, this will become obvious, are nation-state sponsored. So these are nefarious, malicious actors that are going after this particular challenged area as it relates to the critical infrastructure. As an industry overall, when I talk about cybersecurity and we discuss what the challenges are overall, we talk about it's the security perfect storm has actually come upon us. So if you, as one of the other speakers mentioned, the exponential attack surface growth as you think about the number of devices that are now IP enabled, as well as the introduction of Internet of Things devices. The attack vector for being able to compromise systems has exponentially grown to the point where if you subscribe to that theory that it is exponential, it becomes almost impossible to protect against. So we have to change our overall defensive strategy as we go forward. The security market from a cyber standpoint is very fragmented. If any of you have had the pleasure of attending the RSA event in California this year in 2016, it happened in February, I believe, there were about 1,100 cybersecurity vendors participating on the floor. Back in 2003, there were about 750. The attendees went from 20,000 to 40,000 this year, right? Just in our industry alone. And all of the messaging that all of the new vendors come out with propagate basically the same kind of protection message that we'll be able to solve, world hunger and crisis and all that good stuff. The challenge is we've not only fragmented the consumer's understanding of how to actually design a unique security reference architecture to protect themselves, we've also challenged the consumer of the technology with an interoperability problem. We have to solve that going forward. I mentioned the time imperative. Here's a challenge where, again, the defenders don't have the advantage that the attackers do with respect to defense. We talk about dwell time in my part of the industry, the time from which we understand that we're under attack until such time as we have the ability to react to it and mitigate that risk. That dwell time, for the most part across the industry, from the time we first identify that we are under attack, can take up to 280 days until we have a position where we've officially mitigated that risk. And again, let me say that again. On average, the industry is 280 days before we actually can mitigate the risk. The last is the industrialization of cybercrime. Series of statistics here that I'll share. Breaches are up 55% year over year, and 30% of the attacks are targeted. So just a few observations there. One that I tell all kinds of audiences. I have responsibility for not only our public sector group, but also our higher education group. So I speak in a number of university systems or organizations, and we talk about the number of new threats that we are actually seeing as an organization under Intel Security. There are 316 new threats every minute. Think about that. 316 new threats every minute. That's just my organization. We have about a 400-person R&D organization, and we're seeing that many. That equates to more than 5 every second. So there's some new variant of a threat condition every second. 5 every second. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, is reporting that attacks against critical infrastructure, there was a 7-fold increase in attacks from 2014 to 2015. Over the course of the last year or so, we've seen some high-profile attacks. I think the general, one of my colleague speakers here mentioned the Ukrainian attack that came out. That was just in December of 2015. I want to talk about that particular attack here. So another observation, I'm going quickly based on time. There was a industry vendor that, as an experiment, set up a series of decoy systems for ICS SCADA water utility networks. And as they set up these decoy networks, the intention was to lure in the bad actors to watch their techniques and tactics in terms of how they go about attacking the system. Out of that, the statistics were kind of interesting, but more importantly, the amount of time and what happened in the time frame. So over a 28-day period, there were 39 attacks with 14 different nation states that were attacking that particular system. That happened in 2013. I just described the attack threatscape is exponentially growing year over year. So from 2013 to 2016, just imagine what those statistics would be today. There's also the notion of an air gap myth, and I'm calling it a myth. So for those practitioners in the field that believe, and the gentleman up here is smiling, for those practitioners in the field that believe that SCADA systems are off-net or it's an embedded system and is not connected, there's one device that connects all systems regardless whether or not they're connected or not, and that's the human element. And the gentleman pointed out the one particular attack scenario was through spear phishing. That continues to remain the #1 attack vector across the industry in terms of all cyber going forward. So the air gap concept is in fact truly a myth. And if we are going to take advantage of technology advances in the future with IoT, etc., the number of sensors coming online will always be connected going forward, so we have to address that. The Ukrainian power grid attack, I just a couple of statistics there. Some of the data that we've been able to gather from industry and some of the reporting and investigations that we've done, 80,000 customers lost power within about 6 hours. Over the course of time, those numbers rose to, depending upon who you believe in terms of the reporting, up to 220,000 folks lost power over that particular time. We talked about how that attack started. It was a phishing attack, and from there it followed a very specific kill chain process. You'll hear that term in cybersecurity, and here again points to evidence of we document publicly what the kill chain is. So if you're an attacker, the first thing you're going to do is look at how we react to that kill chain process, and you're going to do something different. I would encourage all the members here today and the stakeholders, the community of interest folks, the thing that we need to do is change the amount of time and how we go about protecting and changing our defensive posture and structure going forward. Time's the enemy here. The attack surface. So I wanted to mention just a few observations about the Internet of Things. 50 billion new devices, 212 billion new sensors. I'm not even sure what this number really translates into. 44 zettabytes, and 85% of those devices will be unconnected, meaning that they'll have access to a network, but they won't be the physical access that's connected by a wire. So that's just some statistics. The cost of the sensors over the past 10 years has gone down twofold. The cost of the bandwidth over the past 10 years has decreased by 40 times, and the cost of processing over the past 10 years has decreased by 60 times. In order for us to capitalize on the technology growth that we all envision going forward with the Internet of Things, the defense profile clearly has to change. The last thing that I want to cover off on here is we've reached this critical mass point in terms of the number and volume of threats that we're seeing across the board, across the entire threat landscape. One of the obvious things is we can't keep up with the actual demand on cyber professionals to defend that network. Based on recent surveys that have been done, by 2020 we're expecting a skills gap just in cybersecurity professionals of about 2 million people. So for those of you that are interested in this particular field, there are some young faces in the crowd. as my colleague mentioned, this is an area where we need help, whether it comes from the National Guard, it comes from the university systems. Clearly there is a gap here in terms of skill set, and we're not producing the number of assets that we need in order to defend the nation's critical infrastructure. Right? Again, let me say that number. It was a workforce study conducted at the end of 2015. There will be 2 million net new jobs that won't be filled by the year 2020. That's simply in less than 4 years. So in summary, I'd like to wrap up by saying that public-private alliances are key to success. I think that's been a common theme throughout the speakers today. The cybersecurity of our critical infrastructure and power grids has to remain a national priority going forward. We must elevate this to the highest levels across all of government. One observation I do want to make is the industrial control system and SCADA systems are not just privately owned systems. Some of my folks here in the military, some of their responsibilities also include industrial control systems. We would classify weapon systems in that case, et cetera, and I work in that arena every day. So it's a broader problem than just a public-private challenge. Our military also needs assistance in this area as well. There's no single organization or entity that can address the entire cybersecurity challenge alone. So we are advocates and believe in that this is truly going to be a partnership effort that allows us to go forward. The adversaries have the advantage of time, and real-time information sharing between public and private sectors is a significant investment area that not only Intel is participating in, but we also work with some of our other cybersecurity companies in the industry, and we believe that is also key to the success going forward. So the alliance, the partnerships, and information sharing are key areas we need to invest in, and also invest in resources and bringing to bear finding additional folks that can help us in defending the nation's critical infrastructure. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time today.